Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Wickedly Judged, the podcast where we shine a light on wrongful convictions, expose flaws in the justice system, and fight for reform through advocacy. I'm your host, Rebecca, and as always, I'm so thankful you're here with me today. Before we dive into the second half of Mary's incredible story, I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who make this podcast possible. First, a huge thank you to Veteran Alliance for sponsoring this episode. Veteran Alliance is committed to supporting justice reform and standing with those who fight for what's right. Their dedication to advocacy aligns perfectly with our mission here at Wickedly Judged. And, of course, a massive shout out to JP Verse of Versifier Records for providing our intro and outro music. Their talent and creativity help set the tone for every episode, and we couldn't be more grateful for their support. If you haven't already, don't forget to check out our merch store on our website. We've got some amazing designs, including the Wickedly Judged logo t-shirt, Prison Reform, and the Justice is Blind t-shirt. Every purchase helps us keep this movement alive, and it fuels our mission to expose injustice. Head to wickedlyjudged.com to grab yours today. And as always, if you believe in what we're doing, please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can make a difference. In our last episode, we introduced you to Mary and her family's heartbreaking story. After taking in their great niece to provide her with a stable home, Mary and her husband became the targets of a devastating false accusation. We talked about how Michigan law, which allows convictions based solely on the word of an accuser, played a critical role in this case. We also heard Mary describe the emotional toll this has taken on her family and the shocking judicial bias they faced during the trial. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I encourage you to go back and check it out before continuing with this episode. It provides important context for what we'll be discussing today. Now, let's dive into the second half of my interview with Mary, where she shares more about her family's fight for justice, what happened when they went to court, her advocacy work, and her hopes for the future. Alrighty, guys, I got Mary Wicker back on the phone with me for the second part of her interview. Hey, Mary, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Rebecca. Thank you.
So we had a court hearing last week on June 2nd. Tell us what happened.
Well, we went in on the 2nd, and then the first thing we found out is the jurors were flipping mad and asking our attorney why they had to be there. And both the attorney and the prosecutor went in there and tried to explain it to them. And then they did not have all of the jurors there. So I can't remember. I think they took some of them. That's what they did. They took the ones that were there and questioned them, and then they had to postpone it for another day and try to get the other 2 jurors in.
Now, were these the same jurors that were in the original trial, or were these new ones?
Yes, they were all of the ones who deliberated.
Okay.
Yep.
So when was the hearing rescheduled for?
The following day, and we did do that. Yeah.
Okay. Can you describe the atmosphere? Who all was there?
Yes. On the first day, we took, several of our friends came in support, and then it was the same judge who tried the case, and then it was a different prosecutor. She acted high and mighty, though, just like the other one. And then it was our lawyer. And then Doug was on video call.
Oh, so he didn't even get to come in person.
No. And the hard thing was my sister-in-law tried to warn us because he can't hear that well. And he said it echoed so bad in there he couldn't hear much. And then day 2, because everybody else had taken time off work, we had, I think there were 4 of us ladies in there, and then it was the same get up. Doug was on video, and then there was the prosecutor for the appeal court there, and the judge, and our appellate attorney. And that one, they were supposed to have 3 3 or 4 other jurors, and then the one still didn't come. So, but they came, for both of those days, they questioned them with similar questions. And what they were trying to tease out is, was there a breach, with the person who complained at trial? And we felt it was tainted, and what they determined is that they did not think it was tainted.
Of course, that's their opinion.
Well, and it was funny, what the one person who seemed to be pretty intelligent and was answering questions, then the prosecutor got up like they always do and said, basically like, so what you were saying is it's like this, this, and this. Is that what you meant? I just thought, you people are really something. But it did not feel to me like we were going to get anything. And the thing that I saw from just the outsider person is that, number one, they were pissed because they had to come. Number two, it had been 8.5 months since the trial. Number three, the person who was like, do you call it the foreman of the jury? Mm-hmm. Like the head person. She was supposedly an educated woman, and she was the one who ran that, and they got such a quick verdict, and she was the only one out of all of them who said, I don't remember anything. I thought, funny you don't, and the feeling that I got with all of them is the way the questions, were asked. If they were to say that they talked to somebody or somebody talked to them, they know they would be breaching what they were supposed to be doing in there. And so nobody was going to say anything. They said they remembered, like they couldn't even remember my niece's name unless the appellate attorney said her name. So, for some people, I get it, but I think it still goes back to the fact that they wanted to get out of there. And, they were there for what they thought was going to be a week trial, and the way the judge kept extending it out, leaving early, doing all these shady things, in my opinion, then they went into the second week. And I just felt like they just all went in there, and because, the judge actually said you don't have to, consider the doubt or anything, you can just consider her word and convict. So, they want it out. And I mean, because most people say if you're going to convict somebody, you're not going to be in there for just 2 hours and be like, poof, you're gone. Put somebody away for 25 years. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely crazy.
Yep.
Now, how did the judge and the prosecutor respond to your guys' side of the argument?
So after, we cleared up the stuff, and they were in agreement, both sides were in agreement that they didn't really find anything as far as the jury being tainted, then our attorney went up and asked for a mistrial based on what she put in the note, which was that the prosecutor, she put some things about the prosecutor, like misconduct, but she was really focused in on the expert witness and on the lack of evidence. And so, of course, then that prosecutor, the opposing prosecutor, got up there and explained that she didn't have to have any evidence, and the judge concurred with that she didn't have to have any evidence, that her word was the evidence. And then they really hammered away at the expert witness. And I'm not going to go into too many details of that because I don't want to say a strategy, but it was a long shot to ask for a mistrial. We knew that going into it, but what the attorney said is she thinks the whole event helped in the process of the next appeal. And I agree based on a lot of things they were hammering on. So hopefully that will help in our next process.
Now, have there been, as of this day, any decisions made, or are they still,
Oh, the decision they made is they denied the mistrial.
Okay.
They did not want to give a mistrial based on the fact that the expert witness is so smart and knows everything, basically, and the long and tall of it, and that the victim didn't need to ever evidence corroborated, and that the jury believed her, whatever. So, typical case like this where with this rule, I'm actually reading it here and I see some of these things and I'm like, it gives the appellate attorney a lot. And she had sent me, there was actually another case in May, and I asked her to send it to me where she's saying the Supreme Court is not okay with this child sexual abuse accommodation syndrome. And I read it and then I just got upset and thought, that doesn't sound good. It sounds like they, erred toward, the court or the, not for the defendant, but she said, oh no, you're reading it wrong. And she explained it. And she said the Supreme Court is getting really tired of them using that syndrome. So our hope is basically in that. And as I read, like there's an actual act, and I'm assuming this is from Michigan, but it says Revised Judicature Act of 1961, and it says what's admissible for an expert witness. And I've got a whole bunch of stuff highlighted. So I think they've just sadly been able to get away with this and use this stuff, but now it's coming out saying that the stuff they're using is not, I think I mentioned that in the last interview, it's not accepted by the American Psychological Association or the American Psychiatric Association. And it says if you're going to use the stuff, it has to be generally accepted by those types of groups, So I'm just hoping that they keep going in this direction and people are able to go back and ask for a retrial or a dismissal for them using, this person.
Absolutely. Because it seems like they're, like you said, like they're just taking advantage of it and not actually doing their job of investigating and finding evidence and everything. They're just going by this outdated law.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, it takes more to prove rape or child molestation or whatever than just somebody saying something.
Well, right. And it says like part of what the prosecutor said to the jury, she was just horrible. And she, this is what they trained to do. But it says, now, first, I want you to know, the first thing I want you to know is you will receive instructions that says that if you believe Kylie's testimony in and of itself establishes proof beyond a reasonable doubt, that you need nothing more to convict the defendant. If you go into that jury room and you sit there and the first thing that you say is, I think her testimony establishes proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and all of you unanimously feel that way, you literally do not have to consider one more thing. There is no more to consider. Or it says there is more to consider, but you don't have to consider it. And to me, that just seems so ridiculous when they had a lot of other evidence in the trial. But the interesting thing, I had actually been going through this and it just infuriates me. Somebody else told me this was in here and I didn't see it, but they said there was a spot where juror number 1 actually said, he said it in record that, oh no, once they said that it was a child under 13, I already knew right then he was guilty without any evidence. And this is what I think the problem we have across the country is, how much media can create narratives. And it reminds me of like back in the day with the Salem witch trials. We have to have somebody to blame for something. So we're going to go after this this group of people. And again, like I said, the new thing is they're saying white older men, and that's not probably all of them because they're going after younger ones too. But it's interesting that they use the white category and, you just say it and people believe it. And so I think number one, they wanted to get out of there, but I think that you could tell during the trial, a lot of them were like nodding their heads off to sleep. The one girl who never showed up, she slept a lot of the time. And the lawyer, Doug would say, hey, they're sleeping. And the lawyer didn't do anything. And the judge didn't do anything. And you're right about, when we said, why should they investigate? Why do they have to investigate if they have a law like this and nobody's calling them out on it?
Right.
And
exactly.
When they can use an expert witness that they pay probably thousands of dollars to fly them in and do that in itself, like when you're talking about a fair trial, it's not a fair trial if you can't defend yourself. And, there's other excerpts in here. My brother paid another lawyer, my brother-in-law, and, he says, like, you're, supposed to be able to have a fair trial. And he goes into a lot of other cases with relevant facts. And what it really points out, which I've seen, it's the prosecutor's duty to refrain from improper methods calculated to produce a wrongful conviction, as it is to use every legitimate means to bring about a just one. You're not supposed to be like what we've talked about. They're just, foaming at the mouth to get a conviction. And that's not what their job is.
Right.
And they're not making the country more safe, because the thing with the plea deals too, you let people out on, you're letting guilty. We know that there's people who have actually committed crimes and they're letting them out on these plea deals because they just want the conviction. And that in itself tells everyone, you don't care about this. This is not what you care about. You do not care about justice. You do not care about the victim, and you do not care about the accused. Because if you cared about the victim, what about when you know somebody really did it and you've got evidence, but you're going to give them a plea deal, and then you don't have any evidence on someone like my husband, and you're going to give them 25 years because you just don't care. and again, like I said last time, how's that helping the victim who got wrapped into this, in my opinion, and was probably mostly doing it for attention that she never got, and then now she's got to sit on?
Right.
Yeah, it's insanity.
It absolutely is. And what about, okay, so the people that are guilty that get out on these plea deals, what about their next victim?
Right.
How
and
are you being fair
happens.
to the next person?
Right. It happens. The same thing with rape cases. They go in, they come out, or they even rape the female prison guards, and like you have people who actually have this issue, and then you're not giving them any treatment. They say they're getting on treatment, but take it from me, somebody who works for a community mental health organization, that's usually where they land because, of course, they don't have insurance, so they're going through government treatment. And our treatment, this is why I'm leaving the company. I mean, I'm not confident that the government treatment is enough for people who need serious help. You need to have people who are trained better than that, who don't have such high caseloads. And I mean, I've treated people, I mentioned that in the last interview, I've treated people, but you have to really be good at what you do. And a big part of treating someone who is a pedophile is trying to understand where that began and what needs they need to have met. And there's a lot of deep hurt and understanding that you have to, like a lot of times if you can get somebody to finally be able to talk about their story when they were younger, it opens up the door to start the healing. But men, especially who have been raped or, sodomized, whatever, as kids, they're trained not to talk about it. You got to be the tough guy. You got to do all this. And even in my niece's case, people whose needs are not met are going to act out later and hurt other people. Like they say, hurting people hurt people because they don't know what to do with all of that anger.
Right.
And we've got prisons full of people, male and female, who that's the part that just kills me the more. I mean, my husband and I both really believe that God wanted us to see this. And I wish we didn't have to see it this way. I mean, I had already seen it in my workplace for years of them taking advantage of the most vulnerable and putting them in prison. But I just feel like there's got to be a second heaven for all of these that are also victims who have been put in prison. And not that people don't need to go to prison, but we need to do reform. We need to get it back to rehabilitation instead of just punishment, because you're essentially, you're making more crime, because if you let people out that you've never helped, they're going to get back out on the street, especially if they're felons. They can't get a job. There's places they can't go. It's just really rough. It's changed my way of seeing, everybody complains about people on the street, and there's a lot of scammers out there, but a lot of times I see especially men who just think they could be like my husband and then come out with no support system. And what are they supposed to do? Nobody wants to hire them. They don't have anywhere to go, so they're loading up the shelters. They get on drugs because they get so discouraged. And I'm not saying that's all of them, but that is a reality.
Oh, it's a big reality, because a lot of people won't give housing to somebody unless, the conviction was 7 to 10 years ago. And it's like, what do you
can't
expect?
have a felony.
Yeah.
You can't. Once you got the felony, and that's the thing with these prosecutors too. Oh, they want that felony. They want that felony. I mean, they'll if they can get a plea deal, they'll bump it down to a misdemeanor. But if they can get that felony, they really want that one too. And I don't know. At the end of the day, I just know when I work with people, they're human beings, and I've got to do what's right so that I can go to sleep at night. And I don't know, between my niece who got in this story and was able to do this to somebody, to her whole family. I mean, I was just at my mother's today, bringing her a birthday dinner, and she said she was a witness, and she witnessed to the best of her ability because she was the secondary daycare person for us. And she just got up there and told the truth. But since that point, she said, none of that family, except my sister, who is the guardian, comes over and gets paid to assist my mother with some nursing stuff. But other than that, none of that family has come to see her since then. So she's on the blacklist for, again, if you're a drug and criminal family and somebody goes against you, then you're considered a snitch. And she's 91 years old. And she loves all of her family. And this whole thing was very hard for her, but she did not believe what was said, by the child. And she just knows that the child has had a lot of trauma. And, it's unfortunate, but, like I said, if people are that troublesome, you're better off not having them around anyway. And I've had to explain to her that's how come I can't do it, because if they want to do this to us, what am I supposed to face them? No, it's called boundaries.
Right.
You're not. And I'm loyal to my husband. God even orders that we are to first honor God. And if you're married or coupled, that's your second, even before your children.
Yep.
You are supposed to, once you leave and cleave, it's your husband first or wife first. And so and especially for the fact that they did this to someone who's innocent, I'm 100% loyal to my husband. And there's no doubt in my mind that they're being dishonest because they brought me into the story,
Right.
It's like, yeah, there's no doubt, and there was other evidence to say that things she said were not true. But yeah, what a world. And I keep seeing these younger ones, like on the GoFundMe pages and stuff. They're not all older like my husband, and they're younger in there, and moms are trying to get them out. And I'm just like, man, before too long, if they don't start changing some of these rules, the places are just going to be full of sex offenders.
Absolutely.
Because they can.
Yep. Just because
and they're not really sex offenders. Because, I just sent, I don't know if anybody else knows it who would be listening to this, but there's a organization called NARSOL, and I ended up getting their newsletter. It's this pile of stuff. Oh, but yeah, NARSOL Digest, but I can't remember the acronym, but it's like to try to have common sense law for sex offenders. Because like they pointed out, once you put somebody on a sex offender list, it's, again, branding you like it was in the Salem witch trials. But you could have been the cop who stopped at the side of the road and took a pee, and your other cop came by and gave you this, and now you've got this, Or
Yep.
like you could be this girl at our work who she was working at one of our treatment centers, and she ended up having sex with the guys, but it was willing. But, she didn't get any jail time. She got 5 years of probation. She shouldn't have been doing it. If she was licensed, she would have lost her license. But, she's now on the sex offender list for life. And, it's like, really?
Or the ones who are 18 years old and their girlfriend is 15 or boyfriend is 15.
Oh, yeah.
And you're on the sex offender list for life when it wasn't sexual abuse. You were in a relationship.
Right. Consensual.
Yeah.
We had, I think I might have mentioned this before, we had a younger guy that Doug was in the county jail with, and his girlfriend, they were engaged and everything, and they had a baby, but she evidently got really upset after losing a job and took her own life. And he was just devastated. I've got this 2-year-old son, and now she's gone. And when they got him into the jail, he was on the suicide watch and all that, but they gave him 10 years. And even though it says on there, because the criminal sexual conduct 1 says it doesn't matter if it's consensual. And she was older, and he was a little bit older, but he looks to me to be like probably on the spectrum. And a lot of them, I know a bunch of them. My tax account son is on the spectrum, and he's in. These girls, say whatever, and these guys are socially awkward. And what a way to ruin somebody. I've treated clients like that, and they're like, they come out and they're just like, they'll say, I just don't understand. I don't understand the social rules here with girlfriends. And the girlfriends think it's funny.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's so much research on, the families when they get divorced, or, other friends of ours where the guy breaks up with somebody because she started a fight, and that's the thing, like girls will start fights and they'll be beating on the guy, and he gets upset and starts fighting back. And who do they arrest? They arrest the man. And then now he's got a record, and then they turn around later and say, oh, well, the girl said he, did something, but it's all about this revenge because they broke up with him. the guy breaks up with her, realizing how crazy they are, and then they go after him for that. Yep. And then, well, they had a record because they got arrested because somebody has to get arrested. And it's like, I mean, I've seen it happen both ways. I'm not being, sexism with this. I've seen it happen to women and I've seen it happen to men. But the men have had it rough a lot of times with that because the standard has been, get the man out of the house. And there's some abusive women out there. And and this is abuse what my niece did.
Absolutely.
It's criminal. We had a friend post who's working on some legislative stuff here. She just posted on Facebook, do you think that false accusers should be charged? And I said, absolutely. And then she said, well, I think they should be given the same amount of time that the guys are getting. That the victims of the real crime, the falsely accused, are getting. Yep. The scary thing about that is then they would never come clean if they ever felt that they had to come clean because they'd know they'd be looking at 25 to life. But I do feel like if that was a part of law, that if you get caught falsely accusing, you'd be a lot less likely to do it. Just a lot of common sense laws that there should be, we should be following in this country.
Absolutely. So what are the next steps in Doug's legal process, and how long do you think it'll take?
Well, the next step is 21 days. Our appellate attorney had to file her brief, and she had it pretty much done. This was an evidentiary hearing, kind of a segue, and we knew if we chose it was going to delay it for about 90 days, which it did. But it was a good shot, to just try, since it did seem like there was a tainted jury. I still think the jury was tainted, but, you can't get them to say so. But so since that got cleared up, then it is the 21 days for her to turn in her brief, and then the prosecutor always has that same amount of time to respond, and then it moves on to the appellate court. And so they say 6 to 9 months, but I've even heard those taking longer. Our hope is we'll win at this level. If it doesn't go to this level and it goes to the Supreme Court, we'd have probably even a higher chance of winning because of what's going on with that expert witness. And again, they used a lot of that terminology, so they locked it into their record. And there were steps before the trial I don't know if you know what the Daubert hearing is, but our attorney did ask for a Daubert hearing. Anything he asked for in advance, every time we went to a pre-trial, this judge denied. And so that's all in the record. So hopefully those things will help. But it just depends. What we could use now is just prayer for who is going to be the judges, because you never know who you're going to get,
Exactly.
But we are going to be hopeful until we have to go to the next step. So this is the first one. This is the direct appeal, and they can only go on the, trial errors of the judge, of the prosecutor, and stuff like that, that she doesn't want to do the whatever you call it, the one with the lawyer. She may add some stuff into there, but she said that would come next. Like any evidence that didn't get shown can't go into this first step of the appeal. And that's what's so frustrating, is you've got somebody who's innocent sitting in a prison, and then these steps take too long. I'm sure because you probably burned through all of yours with your fiance, but everybody tells me there's little hope. And even the appellate attorney said, it's 3%. I've read 10% on the high end of people who get appeals, but you got to try.
Yeah, you can't quit fighting, for sure.
No. And then the rest of the stuff is that we did get, our Guilty by Hearsay website is up and running. We've had a few little glitches with it, but I did get the rule on the post. And if you go onto the website, it's just guiltybyhearsay.com, and it also comes up if you put in false allegations. And so it is up and running, and there is an area for people to become a member, where they have to put in their email if they want to read the post. But I want people to know that you don't have to do anything with that. If it was a marketing type of program, then, your email would maybe be on a marketing list, but there's no marketing happening on this site. This is just to help people who have been falsely accused. And eventually I may put more of my husband's story and other people's stories on there. There is a neat little thing where if you become a member, you can post in the group. But again, you have to put in an email or link it to your Facebook or something. But there will not be any pressure for anybody, believe me, because I can't hardly even keep up with that. But it is just a place for people to also, they can contact me because if they're just getting accused, if they're looking for supports and helps and stuff. Of course, we're from Michigan, but this can be accessed any place. So it was a feat to get it up and running. I'm not a professional techie, but I've had some help with that. But yes, we just hope that everybody will be willing to tell their stories. And for legislators, they need to see websites like yours and podcasts and things. And I did list you on the resources page for yours. And again, your last podcast with Tony, I think that they should make that into a movie because that pretty much describes the corrupt corporation we have, which is called the Department of Criminal Justice.
Yeah, for
what
sure.
Is it? Department of Corrections, the National Department of Corrections. It's all, like, if people don't understand, I think you've explained it. It's a corporation, and we need to get back to constitutional law. I know that Trump did say it was on a YouTube clip, he said, "What is this? The Department of Injustice?" He said, "This has to change." And so, I'll take hope anywhere I can take it. And hopefully he meant it. And, hopefully they get some people who can figure out a different way to do these things. Because I think the common person, even if they don't know much about prison, they're not fond of having all of this money spent on prisons out of tax money. And they never want to give any increases, which can hurt the inmates. But if they did things differently, there's so much that they could do. You could have people on house arrest. There's all kinds of things they could do to save their, precious, you know how it is.
Yeah,
they want
even
all
if
the money they can pull in, though.
Yeah, even if they did like training programs in the prison,
Well, they're supposed to, but that's the other thing. They will try to make sure they can never access their training until past their time for their first parole. And I've heard that a lot, where moms and things are saying he's supposed to have parole, but they've never offered the classes. But they're supposed to, if they didn't offer them, let them out anyway, and then say they can still take them. But it just depends on how corrupt your counties are. And there's a lot of corruption in Michigan. I don't know if you are aware that our Huron Valley Women's Correctional, is the only one in the state, and they've had all kinds of news. And now they just popped up in Newsweek on the article about them filming their strip searches and on camera. And many of the women are taking them to court because of it, because they've been women who have been traumatized, and now you're, filming them while you're stripping down all parts of their body. Does that make any sense?
Yep.
So this is what the body cameras got, and they all feel very humiliated. I can say where my husband is, they're very kind about that. All in all, the place has been very humane treatment, and we keep telling them that we appreciate it. And obviously he isn't giving them any trouble. He's never been in trouble with the law, but I do appreciate that they run a tight ship. And they just had a big thing up there where 17 guys got shipped out. As a matter of fact, during the hearing, when he was on the video, it happened last Monday, and they had to come in with riot gear, and they're cleaning out stuff. And I guess they were cooking drugs in there and all that stuff. So it was nice to see them take action and not just let the other ones who don't do that have to be mingling with them, because they were like the storekeepers running the phones and all. Since they've done that, my husband's been able to call on every one of his call times. So, but there's so many other issues that I want to be involved in. I'm starting a new job and going to work in the private sector for therapy for a while, but eventually I want to go full-fledged volunteering for criminal justice reform. We've got a great gig going in Michigan with our Citizens for Prison Reform, and they've made a lot of things happen, and it's a very small group. So the message I would tell people is, if any of this is impacting you and you think you're getting anywhere, just know a little bit goes a long way. And that's true with legislators too. You don't have to have a huge group, but you just have to keep barking.
Right.
Just like you're doing. and get these stories out there.
Every little bit helps, but it definitely takes a community, big, strong community, people willing to speak up and speak out.
Yep. And that's the one thing I said about CSCs. I know you haven't had, been interviewing for these, but I think I'm trying to get this other person in the state to reach out to you. She's from Newaygo, and a similar case like this. But what we have been finding when we do know people and we try to reach out to them, I think there's such a shame base to it that people don't want to talk about it. And fortunately, myself and my husband, we don't care what other people think. I mean, it's like, if you want to believe that, that's on you. You've got to understand it could happen to you. And so if you want to be quick to judge somebody, it just may come knocking at your door with one of your family members, and then you'll really understand how easy this is to be falsely accused. But we have just said, we've been very open about it. Especially when you're innocent. Why should you have to make like you're, a dog holding your head between your legs?
Right. Yeah, you got to fight because nobody else is going to. They'll just leave you to rot in prison. They don't care.
Yep. But the thing is, I do think that's where some families have been. There's a shame factor to it. They don't want to talk about it. And we've at least been having people talk about it. But, we have an amazing group of people surrounding us to a point where, like today, people came over to help me with stuff, and I'm just so touched. And that we've had, we're trying to go through that difficult process of the setting up group visits and things, but we're getting there. And, I do think I'm encouraged by how much is out there on media. The discouraging part is, how can it be that there's so much out on media, books, podcasts, movies, YouTubes, on people being falsely accused, some exonerated, some not, all of these stories. But yet here we are in the United States of America with the highest rate of imprisonment per capita from any industrialized nation on the planet. That's just shocking to me. So hopefully people, as these younger ones come up, they can start realizing we need to create a different kind of world here. Because, again, it could happen to anybody. And it's not just sex crimes, as you know, that are getting falsely accused. It's like anybody they can get for anything.
Absolutely. Doesn't matter.
Scares me to have it's made me not want to speed or anything, because I do not want to get pulled over and have to talk to a police officer. I know they've always been that way with the African American community, and I have African Americans in my family. And I know. Even when my daughter was younger, they did this internal study in Lansing and tried to say they weren't profiling. And I called, and they ended up putting us in the newspaper. I said, what is this? You're doing an internal study with the police force? Like, how's that going to help tell us if there's profiling? And I can tell you there's profiling, because my daughter's white and she has black friends. And who do they stop? They stop her, leave her in the car, and pat down the other ones that are African American, and they all came from nice families and stuff. I've seen it. We haven't totally overcome that, and it's just hard because it's a whole systemic, thing of wrong that's been done, and so. I get it. But the thing is, at the end of the day, people still can choose to overcome a lot, and we're going to be trying to be overcomers no matter what comes with this. We just know where we're going in the end. We believe that there's a heaven, and we believe that as long as you get yourself right with God and, repent and move on and, all of that, do what the Bible says, then you've got a place in heaven, and that's where we're going to see a lot of these prisoners. For sure.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to be glad to see them there,
For sure.
Yeah, we just can't. And that's true with a lot of the clients I've served. They've just had it so rough. It's so hard to be mentally ill caused by other people and then not get treatment, So, I try to keep myself on who are those organizations that are going to be positive and try to help and roll with that and put the judgment away and just meet people right where they're at, right? And that's what we tried to do with my niece, and even her little sister. was just a handful, but I always loved having her over because I knew how badly she was hurt. And if she would have a blowout, I would just sit down with her and rock her and hold her and say, it's okay. Nobody's going to hurt you here, but they came from places where, there's a lot of hurt and a lot of anger and a lot of just abuse. And there's a whole world like that. So I don't know the answer to all of it, but I know that love is going to be a factor. And again, just not being judgmental to people and trying to understand why people are where they are. And even like my niece, I totally get it. I was talking to my mom about that today. Like, I get why she would do something like this. I mean, she was so not getting attention, and she sure got a lot of it by doing this. But it's just sad that the prosecutors didn't want to try to do what is right, because again, then they essentially harmed her, thinking they got somebody off the street, when really they just made everything worse for everybody.
Absolutely. So give us your website one more time.
It's www.guiltybyhearsay.com.
And you have a Facebook page with the same name?
I do. It's a Facebook group.
Yeah. Get involved, everybody, because it's going to take all of us to change this.
That's right. And never give up. Just like it says, I used to teach seeking safety at my job, and the motto was never, ever, ever, ever give up.
You can't, because if you do, then you're done.
Yep.
You're done.
Yep. There's always hope.
Well, thank you again, Mary, for giving us this update and talking with me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mary's unwavering determination to fight for justice for her husband, Doug, is truly inspiring. As we heard in this second half of her story, she's not just advocating for her husband. She's fighting for systemic change that will protect others from enduring this same nightmare. One of the key takeaways from our conversation is the importance of community. Mary's Facebook group, Guilty by Hearsay, has become a space for people to share their stories, connect with others, and find strength in solidarity. It's a reminder that even in the darkest moments, we are never truly alone. We heard Mary tell us about the outcome of the court date on June 2nd and how they had to postpone it to June 3rd, and then their motion for a mistrial was denied. Now, most people at that point would give up, but Mary and Doug are still fighting to prove his innocence. They're using it as an opportunity to challenge the flaws in his trial and push for a fair outcome. But the fight doesn't end with just her husband Doug's case. It's about creating a justice system that values truth, fairness, and accountability. If Mary's story has moved you, there are a few ways you can take action. First, join her Facebook group, Guilty by Hearsay, to stay updated on her case and connect with others who are as passionate about justice reform as we are. Second, go to the website, guiltybyhearsay.com, where she has resources listed. Hear more about her story, her advocacy efforts, and ways that you can get involved. And finally, support Wickedly Judged by subscribing to the podcast, leaving us a review, and sharing this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Every share helps us amplify these stories and push for the reform our justice system so desperately needs. Thank you again to our sponsors, Veteran Alliance and JP Verse of Versifier Records. Your support means everything to us and to the families that we're fighting for. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to tune in next week as we continue to uncover the truth and fight for justice. As always, stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay hopeful, because nobody deserves to be wickedly judged.